Hi everyone, and welcome to another episode of Pitchside Perspective Podcast. This week, we're diving into the art of 1v1 and discussing whether the modern game is becoming a little too predictable. And joining us in this discussion is former England and Premier League player Steve Guppy. Steve has a vast experience in the game as a player and as a coach, serving under the likes of Martin O'Neill and many others. Join us in this episode as Steve shares his insights and stories on how to conquer the 1v1.
1, 2, 3, 4.
So Jack, 1v1s is our topic of conversation today. For me, I feel like that art form is kind of going out the game. It's too much passing and keeping the ball in safety. What do you think?
I think it's on an edge right now where it could go either way. But at the same time, I think the players that still bring all the eyeballs to the league and to the TV screens are still those attacking, exciting players. So I think those players are in the league. I think it's gonna be exciting to see this season. Do they get the opportunity, or are they encouraged to take people on a little bit more, use that kind of dribbling and 1v1s or even 1v2s, and be brave enough to lose the ball at times, and their teams be okay with the fact that they might lose the ball, because if they do go past and they create chances, ultimately that's what's going to win the matches.
Any players spring to mind when you think about like dribblers and flair players that can beat a player and that bit of flair? Any players pop up in your head?
I think from the past, the obvious one is Ryan Giggs. Obviously, in his prime, going past people. The FA Cup semi-final goal is an obvious one to point to. They goes past 3 or 4 players before scoring. In the modern game, who's the equivalent? I think there's people. I like watching Isak run with the ball. But obviously, Jack Grealish is one that I think a lot of people right now are looking at. Will he get the opportunity at Everton to maybe go back to what he was doing in his Villa days, driving forward with the ball?
Yeah, it's definitely one of those. Like, I look at like Nani at United, and he was kind of a little bit under Ronaldo's shadow. But when you talk about flair and just that drop of the shoulder and beating players, he was unpredictable. But there were so many players, I feel, in our generation and the generation before us that was like almost the mentality of like beat a player and go forward with it. Whereas now, and us as coaches, sometimes we're a little bit too safe. But hopefully with our guest today, we'll be talking more about 1v1s. But I've got to say, that shirt you're wearing, iconic.
Oh yeah, this is a good one for sure. Any players spring to mind on this shirt?
The first one that comes to my mind is Gareth Southgate, but it's not for good reasons.
Yeah. Let's try and find a more positive one. Maybe an Alan Shearer.
I was going to say, who was your favourite player like wearing that shirt?
I think, probably Alan Shearer was scoring a lot of goals for England maybe at that time, right? Would it be? So we'll go with him. I think at the same time this shirt was out, it was also the iconic goalkeeper shirt with David Seaman. Is that right? With lots of colours going on. So that was a great time for goalkeeper jerseys too.
Yeah, I feel like that era, the goalkeepers had the best uniforms out of everyone. They could get away with whatever they wanted, like different colours, and no, it was brilliant.
Right, there's long sleeves, baggy and thick, and there's some belters out there.
Before we do go on though, the Guess Who challenge. You're currently winning 4-3 in this challenge. Obviously, you had a strong one last week, getting it after the second clue. So I'm going to try and test you a little bit and see if I can claw my way back. Clue number 1 worth 5 points. This player made over 250 appearances in La Liga before moving to England.
250 appearances in La Liga before moving to England.
Any wild guesses, or you want the next clue?
I feel like someone like a Morientes when he went to Liverpool. Obviously played a lot of games in the Liga. So that can be my first guess. Just throw that one out there. But that's an interesting one.
Okay, you want the second clue?
Sure, yeah.
So this player won the Euros with Spain twice.
Okay. Yeah, I'm still thinking Morientes. Yeah, all right. Price gets now, or can I wait?
I mean, you can wait. I mean, if you're looking in Morientes for these two clues, then we'll see how it is.
I'm Morientes for the first clue, and I'm going to buy myself some time in the second clue.
All right. Well, an interesting one this week. We'll see if you get it. Talking about flair players, Mr. Steve Guppy, how are you?
Very well, thank you. Some lead in going in from that. Thank you.
I mean, it was. I mean, it's true, right? I've been fortunate enough to watch you a little bit play, like when I was a kid, and I think when we think about these players that take players on, people automatically go into your Ryan Giggs and that, but it was exactly how you played your game: a drop of a shoulder and beating players, right?
Yeah, exactly right. That's where my passions lie and where I was most useful, I guess, because it's quite a weapon, and maybe we can get into how it came to be as we progress. But that's something that probably now long retired is that moment of a 1v1 against a defender is what I miss the most.
Yeah, no, brilliant. And so, Steve, really appreciate your time. And as a new guest to the podcast, Jack's got some quick fire questions for you.
Yeah, name?
Steve Guppy.
Favorite team?
Well, I supported Southampton as a child, but they binned me after 2 trials, so now I support the teams I played for, mainly Leicester, I guess.
Yeah, currently got Huddersfield.
Probably the kit you're wearing.
Nice. Well, just for you, best player seen live or played with?
Well, obviously Messi would be an obvious answer and a true answer, but in recent years, probably to be a bit different. The best players I've seen live in recent years, working with Ireland, was Mbappe and Lewandowski.
Well, yeah. And then lastly, best sporting memory.
Wow, best sporting memory is listen, I'm not trying to say I was world class or anything like that, but turning professional, playing for England, winning at Wembley, just take your pick, just those unbelievable landmarks were. But I think we all grew up as English lads, the cup finals and all that, Wembley. I was desperate to play at Wembley. So let's say playing at Wembley for the first time. I've got a bit of a long-winded story. Maybe we'll get to that, how it all came to be and whatever, maybe later on.
Yeah, no, definitely for sure. We'll get into the journey of it. I want to ask a bonus question on top of those 5. So we asked obviously the best player you've seen live. Who would you say was the best player you played with?
Well, I mean, obviously lucky enough to play for England, and so when I think of that, Alan Shearer springs to mind. But I think actually playing with week in week out, I'll go with a couple of players really. At Leicester, in that Leicester team I played at, a lad called Muzzi, was a fabulous player. Played in the World Cup semi-final for Turkey. Very, very good player. But in my time at Celtic, I'd have to say Henrik Larsson was a true world-class player, and it was an honour to play with him, I guess.
Just imagining you in training and games, just putting the ball into the box for Henrik Larsson. That must have been a great feeling.
Let me tell you, we used to do extra work because that's the thing. There's no mysteries why he's world class. He works incredibly hard, or he did. He used to, grab me for crossing at the end of training. Now, that sounds great, but when there's one person in the middle and I'm sort of storming down the line, because I wanted to do it at match pace, I didn't want to do it walking because I wanted to improve as well. So I'm flying down the line crossing, and I've got to pick out one player in the box. If I miss him, then he didn't suffer fools, let me tell you. So it was a lot on it, even training, extra training. I had to hit every cross perfect for him. So, with that in mind, he made me better as well because out of fear of messing it up.
Yeah, I'm sure you, when you got a player like that standing in the box, right, you're probably thinking, I've got to deliver here. Like, there's no hiding spot when there's only one person.
It was, I think, quickly going about the time at Celtic, it was an incredible team. Training was in many ways harder than the games. So you think on match day, and I didn't play as much as I'd like to have done. It was very, very competitive. But imagine crossing balls in, and you had Chris Sutton, John Hartson, and Henrik Larsson in the middle. I mean, you'd be hard pushed to put in a bad cross, really, to be honest.
Yeah, well, it's one of those as well. So when you talk about that, like the word that comes to my mind for your career as well and how you get started was resilient, right? Like you have a bit of a unique story about how you got into the pro game, and I'd love for you to kind of go into that, because I've been lucky enough to hear it from you, and I think that word of resilient really comes into play here.
Yeah, and that's one of the reasons I like to do these sort of things is because I think my story, will hopefully help younger players, because there is a familiar theme to what happened to me, but it's actually quite unique in many ways as well. But so very, very quickly at 12 years old, I'd been doing well, and life had been, I was in Southampton's academy on trial there, doing well, scoring loads of goals. But by the time I'd got to 16, I hadn't had my growth spurt. I stayed the same size from 12 to 16. And so by the time I got to 16, Southampton had long since binned me, and I couldn't even get in our school team. And I don't think the school team ever won a game. So at 16, I took the bold decision to retire. So I didn't kick a ball for 2 whole years, from 16 to 18, when I worked on a building site. I went fishing every weekend. As I say, I caught some very nice fish, but I did not kick a ball for 2 years. And then 17, 18, I got my growth spurt. And I grew into this, as I always say, this impressive specimen before you today. And with that I got my pace back. So all the 1v1 skills that I will have to say, from the age of 4, my dad had me in the back garden, run it and drop on my shoulder and bursting past him. And we did that every day, and it became an obsession. And so those 1v1 skills were so incredibly important to me, or through that work with my dad, because I didn't have an academy to work through. And in many ways, I think that possibly helped me. But maybe we'll get to that. So at 18 years old, my mate started like a Division 7 Sunday afternoon team in Southampton, as low as you could get. Guys with big bear bellies chasing after you. And the irony is, when I was making my debut for my mate's Sunday afternoon team, there was a guy called Albert Ferrer making his debut for Barcelona, our first team. And within 7-8 years, we'd be playing against each other in the English Premier League. So, it's, not an uncommon story for players to not get a growth spurt, lose their confidence. All of a sudden they went from the best players to the worst player. Happened to me, but I was able to fight back for a number of different reasons. But I do ultimately think, firstly, it was because of the 1v1 obsession that my dad installed in me, which helped me to recover. Not kick a ball for 2 years and still be able to recover. I think 1v1 work is absolutely instrumental in that.
And do you think it was your dad saw something in you that the 1v1 was going to work?
Yeah, it was. I was really fortunate. My dad was a goalkeeper, ironically. He played for West Brom. So it would have made a lot of sense for me and him just to shoot him in goal. But he played with a player called Terry Payne when he was growing up. And Terry Payne was in the 1966 England World Cup squad. A legend for Southampton, a winger. And he marvelled at how he used to beat players by combining 2 or more body parts to beat them, i.e. a shoulder movement, step over, whatever it doesn't matter what, a scissors, a shoulder drop, a juke, as they call it here in America. They're actually all the same. And I think it's lost in translation on social media. Because what we're talking about here, to take a player on, you need 3 things, really. 3 main things. First, you need to be able to move. You've got to be able to move, because predominantly you're going to be going at pace. But more than that, in your movement, you need to be balanced. So balance is key. Secondly, you need ball control, constant ball touch of the ball, good ball manipulation. 1v1s demands that. And thirdly, and the kicker that a lot of people miss, is to become good at 1v1, you need to be able to create a trick, a bit of deception. And ultimately, what we're talking about is moving at pace with good ball control whilst combining 2 or more body parts. That's what it is. So I'm talking about feet, but maybe your knees, but it's your hips and your shoulders all working together in unison to create the deception to cause the trick. So when you look at it like that, 1v1 work is movement, ball control, and coordination. And that is, for me, the main reasons why I was able to recover, because the movement and coordination work I was installed at me for such a young age meant I could have 2-year break and still come back. And I think movement and coordination are the two most important things for any sport you care to mention, let alone soccer.
Yeah, and obviously you've developed that as you've had that so-called time off. When you then got that look in and that big break, was that ability that you had, was that the thing that got you that professional contact?
It's funny, because what I did, I mean, obviously there was things within my game, that I needed to become better at, and training with your team, your structured training will help with that, not giving the ball away in possession, passing, and, decision making, other things, scanning, spatial awareness, all these things. Actually, you could parcel up in 1v1 work as well, truth be told. But I remember having a long chat with Matt Letizia, for people over here in the States may or may not know him, but he's really big news in Southampton, one of the greatest players ever to play in English Premier League, English players. And he had a similar story where he didn't get into an academy till late on, and he felt it helped him because he was able to become a unique player. How do you coach the way Matt Letizia used to play? Very, very unique. I played against him many times and so deceptive. Used to lean towards you, so you couldn't actually get near the ball, and the shake of the hips, he was gone. And I do think, although I'm not trying to compare myself with Matt, I was able to create a weapon. Whereas if I'd been in an academy, let's be honest, most academies, it's structure, shape, team. Everyone's obsessed with playing out from the back these days. So your actual instinctive final third play gets stifled, and they create clones in many ways. I think English soccer, football, we created a load of wingers over the last 20 years, like give and go merchants, give and go, give and pass, and of course now the latest trend of having inverted wingers. So now, the ones who are really on the payroll to make things happen are in field so that the fullback can go up and down and deliver the passes. Fine if it works, but as they say, if you're a fullback, are you a failed winger? I'm not sure anyone goes into the game wanting to play fullback. So anyway, I'm going on and on a bit. I think there's many things within the game that are stifling, proactive 1v1 play. But I will say this: if you are able to create goal scoring opportunities for yourself and others, then you will go to the next level.
It's interesting you say that about how, like, say, modern day coaches now might be stifling this creativity, the 1v1 take-ons. One of your early managers, a very, very good manager and a lot of history in the game, Martin O'Neill. What was the instructions he would give to you when you played, and what were the little bits of advice? Did he want you to take players on?
Yeah, I mean, I think in this life you need a bit of luck. I had some good luck. I had a dad who saw it and understood what was important and gave me the tools to work at it. And then the next big things that I ran into Martin O'Neill at a very young age, impressionable age, when I was just fighting my way out of that funk, finding my way. And he installed in not just me, all of the players at Wycombe Wanderers we were in the Vauxhall Conference, and he installed in us a belief and a will to win. If I'm being honest, I think the hangover I had from that 12 to 16, that was I was still fighting to get over it, was feeling sorry for myself. Things didn't go well, but poor me, and you almost wallow in self-pity, just very young, immature. And he installed in me actually, forget that. It's about winning. And he wanted me to take players on. He didn't want me to lose the ball, but at the same time, he understood as an ex-winger that was part of the case. And what I basically managed to do, and I think was one of the reasons that he always came to get me, wherever, is that, and I think this really signifies what it is to be a professional soccer player. And I tried to, once I worked with Martin O'Neill, I understood what it was about, is as a professional soccer player, the sun may not shine every day. So there's days where you go out, 1v1's brilliant, it's working, fantastic. But there are days where sometimes the ball can't explain why. It looks like the size of a cashew nut, nothing works well. they're the days where you have to make sure that your opponent doesn't play well. I didn't always get it right, but I always went into a game with thinking, whoever I'm up against, I'm going to outwork you. I'm going to make sure that if I'm not playing well, that you're not going to play well. And honestly, I think that really is, everyone gets romantic about becoming a professional soccer player, but the nuts and bolts, that's a true reflection of what it's really like. Maybe the world-class players, have a different mindset, but your everyday player professionally, that should be their mindset.
You're obviously in that mindset and you've got the instructions from your manager to say, when you've got the ball, we want you being positive. We want you taking players on. How important is it with having support around you, having your left back or your right back, and having centre midfielders and strikers, like you spoke about Henrik Larsson? How is it important to have this structure around you to allow you to have that creativity?
Yeah, I mean, it's everything. I always try to talk to depending on the system. Say we play 4-4-2, my fullback's a partnership. I would always go up to my fullback, every fullback I ever played with, and say, look, I am going to make sure I run up and down all game. You are never going to get overloaded. I am going to be there alongside you. In return, every time you get the ball, your first thought is, give it to me. Because I used to hate the fullbacks who wanted to do the diag and miss me out. Sometimes, you're starved of service. So I had to make sure that the guys on my side were, understood what I was doing and I wanted to be repaid for the effort. So, that's important. And one thing I did find is that the better the team you play in, the easier it was. Because, sometimes you go and play for a really good team, you get on the ball, you've got like 3 options. So it's up to you to pick the right option, of course. And when it's on to take players on, then you should do that. It makes it so much easier when you have great players around you to help. And I've been fortunate in my career to have that, or have had that.
I'm going to say as well is certain managers lean towards certain styles and certain type of players. Obviously, you played for Martin O'Neill on a few different occasions, right? Him having that confidence in you, and I speak about confidence strongly here, how important is that when it comes to the 1v1s, that the manager or the coach, whatever situation you might be in, has to instill confidence to say, you know what, you are going to lose the ball, but don't stop, keep going.
I mean, it's so important. Of course it is. We'll gather confidence in different ways. But, I will add this, right? I had many faults in my game. I wasn't very good at tackling. I wasn't very good at heading, which was a problem playing in the 90s, trust me. But to try and earn the right come the weekend to take players on, I felt I had to do extra work. So after training, even as a professional, I'd go home, have a lie down, get out with a bag of balls, go back to the training ground and go out and work on my own. And I did it every day for my whole career. Every single day. And I used to get a lot of stick from the other players because, sometimes they would embarrass them. And it's not the norm. I've never really seen any other player do it. But I felt I needed to do it because then come the weekend, I could then look at the fullback I was up against and go, right, I work harder than you. And it gave me the confidence I needed. You add to that, Martin O'Neill and his coaching staff, John Robertson, was European Player of the Year as a winger. Steve Wolford, fabulous coach. I was surrounded by great coaches that really helped me. And it wasn't constant coaching. It was the little light bulb moments every now and then. And as a coach now, that's what I strive for. Rather than just constant do this, do that, that the players sometimes want and need. It's more like the little details that give you a little light bulb comes in and go, wow, yeah, that's going to make a difference. I can think of many of those moments. But also to add to that, if I'm being honest, a lot of training was two-touch. It probably still is. And I understand why coaches do that, because it adds structure and shape that they want to put across to the team. But it always used to make me laugh where I'd have two-touch all week, and then come the weekend, the coach would come up and say, Steve, get out your fullback. But, well, that's great. We've not worked at it all week. So that's why I felt I had to go out. So every club I've ever been at, every afternoon, I was out working, practicing my trade. I'd hired someone to leave their job. I was paying them. So I had a fullback. They moved in with me, and then I had a fullback to take on. And, and my girlfriend wasn't that keen on moving in, but I felt was important. I needed that fallback. And so these were the lengths I went to try and make sure I was at my sharpest for match day.
I think you make some good points there about the added work you had to do. You were very fortunate to represent your country at the highest level under Kevin Keegan. And I think there's a quote out there that he described you as a left-footed David Beckham. When you've gone into that England fold, it's a different pressure on your shoulders. Did you feel that pressure, or did you just go, you know what, I'm just going to stick to what I know best?
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely pressure playing for England. It was an incredible experience. As Roy Keane always tells me, I played 2 games that day, my first and my last. But you know, it was an incredible experience, and you can see the pressure. Playing for England was very intense. You want to do your best, and you understand the prestige that goes with it. But ultimately, what I tried to do in my career was try to dumb it down a bit. So, you know, even playing in the Premier League, first time you play at Man United, say, you know, you're going up against, say, Gary Neville, and, you know, Ryan Giggs or David Beckham. It was David Beckham predominantly, I guess. So rather than going, I'm playing against Man United, you know, Roy Keane, blah, 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 I'll be like, no, I'm actually playing against Gary Neville. So I'm here and I have a contest against Gary Neville, maybe a little bit of David Beckham. So, you know, I respect Gary Neville immensely, but, you know, rather than playing Man United, it felt a lot better playing against Gary Neville, because I'm like, okay, you know, he may do better than me, but this is what I'm focused on rather than the bigger picture, you know. And I found that helped me rather than going, 70,000 people, Old Trafford, Man United. It was like, no, I'm here, I'm out wide, and this is the contest that I have to try and do well in.
So you see, you obviously achieved great things in the game, playing for England, and obviously throughout your career. What I'm interested in is kind of, if we go back to the start of having that little bit of adversity that you had to get through, and then the process you went on after that, where you actually took a lot of it on yourself, how you saw the game and how you kind of made it a 1v1 between you and Gary Neville, and just put the other stuff to one side, but where you kind of brought in a fullback just to make sure you're developing yourself away from the training ground too. So if you hadn't have had that challenge at the start with the growth spurt and those 2 years out, do you think you would have got to, one, develop the processes you did to learn the game and develop, and 2, make it as far as you did in the game?
It's a good question. I think first and foremost, my dad installed an incredible work ethic in me, working on the correct things. So at the right ages, I was working on movement and coordination. Absolutely massive. It doesn't matter what I did later on in my career, without that, you know, grounding and work, it would never have come to anything, no doubt. But, you know, as you move forward through this, you know, there's so many different things that sort of help drive you on. One of the things that drove me on was fear. You know, I worked on a building site for 4 years and I hated every day of it. I'm actually a qualified bricklayer. I could build you a barbecue if you wanted, but I don't think I'd take anything else on. But I always had that fear of, if I didn't make it as a footballer, next thing you know, I'm back on a building site. And that used to keep me awake at night. So that afternoon work, you know, obsession to get better, it always makes, you know, and now as a coach, I always find it fascinating, you know, 15 years just working in the pro game. And I don't see players panicking about they're not improving quick enough. You know, I used to, you know, sleepless nights concerning that I wasn't improving as quickly as I wanted to. So that meant, okay, I need to practice more. So if I'm going out for 1 hour in the afternoon, it has to be 2. And, you know, and one thing I used to do as a kid, young player, which I definitely advise to any young player listening, is keep a diary. Is to keep a diary of extra work I did, not work I did with my club or whatever, work I did in the back garden on my own or with my dad. You know, that was the important work to me. You know, that made me different from everyone else, because you keep a diary and you think, you know, you tell a great story. Yeah, I'm super dedicated. I'm always working. And you look at your diary and there's a big gap, 5-6 days, and you're like, well, hold on a minute, maybe I'm not. But then the flip side is, if you're doing it every single day, then that diary looks really full, and now it gives you confidence and you feel like you're winning. And then the incredible feeling of feeling that you've improved year on. I've not had that feeling for a long time, but um, was wonderful. That was the challenge, and I think it should be everyone's challenge. I get it a lot where young players, how do I get an academy? How do I get an academy? How do I get noticed? People. I remember a kid ringing me up 8 o'clock Sunday morning because he was worrying about what agent to go with, and I'm like, listen, you're missing the point. Practice. Your number one job is not to get into academy. Your number one job is to try and find out how good you can be. And if you find that out, then maybe it will lead you to an academy, but maybe it won't. And that's the point. That's the sad thing, because if it doesn't, and you still manage to find out how good you can be, then you should be proud of your efforts, not feeling a failure.
I think that's really interesting how the practice and putting in the work brought you the confidence then to go and play on match day. I think that's brilliant, and a great advice for some of the younger players too. So then moving on to younger players and what they're watching and looking what they're trying to achieve when they're watching professionals on the weekend. What's your take on those kind of modern day wingers and what the young players are trying to develop into in terms of their role models?
Well, I mean, obviously, it's great to watch, the elite players. If you think about the best players right now, I mean, Lamel in Spain, there's a fabulous 1v1 player. And the irony is that everyone started copying Spain. Spanish play out for the back, total soccer, total football, whatever you want to call it. And now Spain have gone full circle, and now they is it 4-4-2? They got two wingers, they get it to them, and they go, and now they're dominating the world again. So I find it fascinating. One thing I think players, it's lost in the weeds a little bit of social media, where 1v1s on social media is all about flicking it over someone's head, putting it through someone's legs. And of course, that's a wonderful thing. But, to me, actual 1v1s, like I said earlier, is creating goal scoring opportunities for yourself and others. So something, with an end result is key. And if you can combine those body movements and beat a player, that's art to me. That's a wonderful thing. But it takes a lot of practice, because ultimately you have to be able to do it without thinking. If you've got a 10-yard run up at a fullback, then maybe you could go, okay, do a trick and beat them. But how often do you get that? It's instantly, as soon as you get the ball, bang, you've got to do it. They're on top of you, bang, bang, especially the higher you go. So you need to be able to combine those body movements without thinking about it. And that's a sign of a true player.
It's interesting you mentioned in there about repetition. You've obviously been involved on the coaching side at several professional teams with the Irish national team. You mentioned earlier as well that a lot of practices are rondo boxes, two-touch possession. So how important is it for coaches that are listening to this to find room in their curriculum and in their practice to do exercises that are 1v1s and build this in? Because it doesn't have to be a winger. It can be any player who's getting caught in these 1v1 situations, but they have to have that ability and have that memory in the bank and that muscle memory to be able to do it when the time actually hits.
Well, exactly. I mean, I think it's instrumental. It's vital. You look at the top end of world soccer now. When players get the ball, there's always a little shoulder movement, bam, bam. You can never seem to get close to anyone. That's a fullback, centre half. They're all doing it. And that's why they're at the top. I understand that. And that's why extra work to me was vital, because the clubs want to do shape. Like I say, there's an obsession with playing out from the back. And I understand you do that, break lines, and people have almost become snobby about it. You're not a proper coach if you don't play the proper way, which is playing out from the back in a lot of people's minds. Well, I'm a big fan of playing the system that suits the players you've got, and I don't see, I think growing up, I think probably the best teams I've seen, when I was a young lad, I always think back to those German teams in the 80s. We used to hate them, of course, because they always beat England, but they played a certain way. They got the ball down and played, no doubt. They played with a reason, and it went forward, and they had exciting wingers, and they had a brilliant centre forward. They had it all, and they were able to dominate in key moments. I think the best teams in world soccer over the last 20, 30 years have been the best at 1v1s. Everyone raves about Barcelona. Well, let's think about that. They had Messi. Of all their total soccer that they played, they had Messi, who got the ball and ran. Once in an age now where it is shaped, defensive blocks, hitting teams on the break and all these things. There's never been a more important time for players to be able to beat someone. Because you beat someone, you beat the press. And now you've created overloads. People talk about 2v1s and things like that. A 1v1 is a fabulous way of creating overloads. You beat your fullback, guess what happens? Centre half's got to come out. Now you've created an overload in the box. So now you've got an opportunity to maybe cross the ball for a goal scoring opportunity. You've got the overload where it really matters, in the middle of in front of the goals. So I think it's where and how you do it. I've just spent, it's been a year now I've left, but I was 4.5 years at Nashville, and I worked every single day with a player called Hani Mukhtar on 1v1 and Jacob Shuffleberg. And both of them, when they came, weren't really renowned for 1v1s. In fact, in the whole time Hani Mukhtar and Jacob had at their previous clubs, I lined up every single one of their 1v1s before they turned up. Decent 1v1s. Not a single goal or assist from either of them from a 1v1 moment. Incredible. So I sat down, spoke about all the things we talked about, and we worked at it every single day. Unopposed work to start with, and then opposed. To get the repetitions in unopposed, to do it without thinking, and then opposed. You need, obviously, the opposed. And look what happened. Hani Mukhtar, MVP of the league within a year. Unbelievable, brilliant at creating goals for himself and others. Unstoppable 1v1s. Jacob Shuffleberg, now a regular for Canada, is 1v1, prowess. Gone for a roof. I know, listen, bit of self-promotion there, apologies. But I'm just trying to explain my experiences and the importance of 1v1 work. But it's not always at the top of everyone's, list and desires in coaching, maybe because they don't truly understand it.
It's an interesting point you make there, how you've gone from obviously unopposed to opposed, and we see players out there using, say, cones and trying to dribble through cones or a pole or a mannequin. But what's your take on, even if it's unopposed, instead of a cone, it's just a person standing there, you, the coach, standing there. So it's more realistic to a game. Rather than going up to a mannequin and beating it, it's going up to the coach and beating it. Not that the coach is trying to win the ball, but it gives that picture in their head a little bit more.
Well, this is the thing. I believe 1v1s, players are taught how to do tricks. They're not necessarily taught how to beat players. There's a big difference, and that's why the 1v1 formula stuff that I do, bucks that trend. Trying to, because there's a load of things that should go into 1v1 work. We're just really touching the surface. There's so many things. I know I've listened to many podcasts on 1v1s, and they always seem to fail at the first hurdle because they just argue about there's loads of different 1v1s. How can you say 1v1 is 1v1 side on, back to goal, front, blah, 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 blah. You can go on. I'm sorry, they're all the same in many respects. It's combining body movements, to create that deception. So, of course, they are slightly different, but if you can become proficient at combining body movements, being balanced, controlled, coordinated, then you're going to be well on the way to be able to do 1v1s in any scenario. So, I think, unopposed work, I used to prefer the idea of visualization rather than, a cone or a mannequin. Although, yeah, whatever it takes. Your point, a defender. If you've got a coach doing it, then of course they're backing off. So now your spatial, the distance, you do the trick, will help you rather than a mannequin stood still, because that's not realistic, right? So I used to try and visualize it, as I was doing my unopposed work, working on the certain techniques of making my trick as quickly as possible, as efficient as possible, but also whilst thinking about my angle approach, speed of approach, placement of the ball after I've done the trick. There's so many elements of it that people don't realise.
Yeah, I think when it comes to it, when we think about 1v1s, what you said, it thinks about there has to be a trick to beat it. How important is it just a subtle body change and a drop of the shoulder? I think of players, you mentioned obviously the Barcelona team and Messi, but like Iniesta and Xavi weren't players that went and like beat 4 or 5 players, but they beat that one player just for a drop. How important is it to be aware of the situation and to know how to just have that little feint, or as they say in America, that little juke, for example?
I think you make a really good point, because Iniesta, Xavi are looked upon as possibly two of the best midfielders in modern times. But they're not sort of about 1v1 players. But they were outstanding 1v1 players. They tend to beat anyone, but they used to combine shoulder movements to create the space to create the pass. To me, that's a 1v1. That's great work. Obviously, then Messi with the clinical taking players on, going past them. So there's many facets of it. And, I think, once again, many coaches think you need 4 or 5 tricks. I disagree. I think it's that old energy of, what is it? Jack of all trade, master of none. You look at the best players, Messi, that shoulder movement, Ronaldo is the step over. I know they do other things, but ultimately, if you were to say you've got one player to beat, and if you beat them, you're in on goal, and it's going to win the game for your team with a minute to go, what trick would they be? I wouldn't mind betting which one they would do. But it's what goes into it beforehand that really matters. The speed of their approach, how comfortable, how balanced they are. The angle approach towards defenders can really hurt defenders in so many different ways. And so there's far more that goes into 1v1s, but you do need to nail down the basic first, where you need to be able to combine those body movements. And when you can do that, I'll give you an example, right? There's a coaching point in that I hear a lot is angular approach. What's your angular approach? I've heard many coaches talk about run at their front foot. I'm sure you guys would have heard something similar, coach. Well, little point. If you're running at their front foot, that means your head's down. So how can that be a good coaching point where you need your head up? Because you need to make decisions, spatial awareness, whether to go left, whether to go right, what's in the box, risk versus reward. Is it worth taking a player on? What's the point? But if you've got your head down, so those little coaching points make all the difference if you get that right. So there's so many things is what I'm trying to say, but it's why you have to work at it. And do coaches spend enough time on 1v1s? No, I don't believe they do. Do they truly understand it? No, I don't think so.
And how important is it as well? We talk about the 1v1, about that first action and beating the player, but that last action of what that next product is. People talk about the ball into the box, a shot on goal, whatever it might be. How important is it to recognize that step as well when it comes to this 1v1?
Well, it is actually everything, isn't it? And I obviously, talk about 1v1s. We should call it not 1v1s. You talk about it end result, because that's the important thing. Because you could take a player on, if nothing comes of it, then you could argue what was the point, because you are taking a risk to take a player on, because you might lose the ball. So risk versus reward is important. But there, once again, when you construct your 1v1, there's things you can do within that to help your end result, because you should know what it is, whether it's a cross, whether you're going to shoot, whether like a Xavi, you're going to create a yard to pass the ball. No, it's all part of the process with the 1v1 and an end result in mind, and to be able to become good enough to do that. I'm talking about elite 1v1s now. For young players, just to learn, to be able to combine those body movements, this will come over time. I'm talking about experiences when I was 28, 29, but it is all part of the process that's vitally, vitally important.
Do you think that's why modern day coaches are favouring the pass before the take on, because it's almost a safety net? And is this lack of creativity killing the modern game and making it a little bit more dull to watch than what it maybe once was?
I think clubs have got to be careful. I do believe so. There seems to be more and more of an undercurrent now where people are a little bit bored. We're all different. If I go and watch a game of soccer, I'm really interested in 1v1 moments. That's what really lights my fire. Obviously, I think no shock there. I think we've established that. And maybe some people will be scoring moments, but I think people got to understand the whole point of the game is to try and score a goal. So If you keep the ball, I get it. What are you trying to achieve? For me, obviously, firstly, you're trying to keep the ball and pass through players and score a goal. Fantastic, great. But secondly, and probably more of an opportunity, you're keeping the ball because you're going to play it left and right. So why are you doing that? Because you're trying to isolate defenders. So you're trying actually to create 1v1s. Okay. So why are you not working at 1v1s more? Because you're working at the shape. You're watching your two switch, play out from the back. You know, the irony is in this day and age, the player, the way teams are set up, who has more touches of the ball than anyone else is a centre half who is predominantly your worst player. But that's how. But they're expected to take players on, take massive risks. You know, I would prefer to see players in the final third who are really very good at these things to get the ball and entertain me that way.
Yeah, I think it might have been Thierry Henry I heard recently talk about when he was coaching. The whole point of playing out from the back is to draw out players, to play through lines, to then create the 1v1 opportunities for the attacking players. So for him, there was nothing more frustrating than taking somewhat of a risk by playing out from the back to get someone in that position to take someone on 1v1, and that player then turning it down, turning back, just to rather keep possession and not take a bit of a risk to try and go at someone.
Yeah, I mean, there's nothing's set in stone. Every that's the beauty of no 1v1's ever the same, and that's the same in soccer in general. So of course, sometimes phases of the game you want to slow the game down. Maybe you've just got yourself in front. You want to keep the ball. There's so many different things. Nothing's straightforward. But I wouldn't mind betting if you watch a game and everyone's playing out from the back, within 3 or 4 passes they go long anyway, because and the interesting thing is now to counter playing out from the back, there's a high press. There's a thing called a high press where players now are committed to the high press. So what they do, they go 1v1, 2v2 at the back. So now the channel ball, which has long since been, thought upon, if you spoke about it, especially being English, you were a disgrace. Now you will see more channel balls than probably you saw in the 70s, because that's where the space is. And now what comes from that? 1v1s. Because now they, to beat the press, they have to commit more and more players, 2v2 at the back. So, there's no way around it. If you're good at 1v1s, you're going to be a good team.
So obviously a lot of this episode we focused on this 1v1 and I would say that the art of it. Obviously you've progressed from your playing days into coaching and now coaching more around this 1v1 situation. You've formed the 1v1 formula, traveling around not only the US but now around the world, delivering these tournaments. Talk to us a little bit about the idea behind it, what that light bulb moment was to go, you know what, I'm going to create this and run with it.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think I've explained a great deal of it. It stemmed from my own experience. I was so fortunate to have a dad who installed that, like we spoke about, movement, ball control, coordination at such a young age. So, I feel that not every kid, parent has that knowledge. So, it was always in my mind, even when I was working with pro players, that I wanted to, find myself in the youth arena, especially in this country, because it's such a vast country, and to unearth 1v1 talent, players who make, didn't get their growth, but players like me, who had the talent, but they got lost in the weeds somehow, and that's what, the 1v1 tournament is about, to try and help improve players, and get parents to understand why 1v1 work for me is the single most important youth development tool for youth development. For youth development. It is so, there's nothing more important in my mind. Passing drills, I hate, it's just, 1v1s encompass 2 things, right? 2 things why 1v1s are so important. Another way of looking at it. To be good at 1v1s, you have to be in control of your own space. So you imagine that space around you. Maybe if you can visualize 3-4 yard radius around your body, that's your space. That follows you around the pitch on match day, wherever you go. Think about that. If you can be in control of your own space, you're a player. Now you've got problems. You're going to be moving at pace. You're going to have defenders coming into your space, try and take the ball off you. But if you can maneuver the ball, being in control of your own space, then you're a player. 1v1s demands being in control of your own space. Second point, being in control space but also being in control of your own body. There's two key components that 1v1 demands constant work on, that combination of body movements. But it's not just about 1v1s. You need to be able to move your body no matter what position you play. So 1v1 work translates to every position on the pitch. And so these 1v1 games I started, really are 15 years in the making of working with professional players. And I adapted these games for youth players to ensure that in each 1v1 tournament, whoever enters in one of my 1v1 tournaments, they get at least 50 1v1 attempts. Everyone attacks and everyone defends. So it makes it inclusive. And as you know, I have this scoring system, got one here actually, where the players can earn points for good attacking and good defending in equal measure. So regularly, we've not been talking about 1v1 defending, but regularly 1v1 defenders win this 1v1 tournament. I'm not sure I like the word tournament. What I'm trying to do is, there's a scoring system so that I can track everyone's development, but I'm there to try and improve their 1v1 skill set. So the scoring system helps me to track everyone's development through the time we're together. It gives them something excited because the kids love a long arm of these bands, as you know, and I get to see that everyone's developing correctly and they normally beat their score every day. And the big thing is that in the 1v1 tournament, most of the games, if not all the games, are to goal. So there's an end result. What more fun could you have of a 1v1 try and score a goal, working on, in fairness, the two hardest things in the game, to beat a player and to score a goal. Probably the other way around. Score a goal's number one, to beat a player number two. So that's what I do. I got other things. I've created an international leaderboard for every age group, boy and girl, from U8 to U16. So when they enter the tournament, their scores are then put onto my database on the website. But to try and, create a bit of competition for players. I was in Alaska last month. How many players have played against players from Alaska? So now I'm in Calgary next week. So now players in America, Canada can now go onto their website and go, how's my scores? Well, how am I stacking up against this lad or this girl in Alaska? And at the back of that, I then want to obviously create a national final where the best players can come together to try and, test their skills. But ultimately, it's to try and improve or try and offer players or inspire players to practice more. That's what it's about.
Yeah, and it's a brilliant concept, and I've been fortunate enough to witness it firsthand. And the improvement you saw from one day to the next was tenfold. So for people listening into this and people who are interested in what this is, where can people find you? Website, social media?
Yeah, I mean, the website, the 1v1formula.com, there's a lot of information there. You can follow me on Instagram and the 1v1 Formula. I have to say my Instagram is a fairly new thing because I was working for Nashville for many years. And so, I wasn't really able to advertise this, understandably, because my focus was on the national team, on that team. But that now has changed. So follow me on Instagram. I upload stuff all the time. I'd love to go on a 1v1 journey with the players I work with. And, the idea, as you know, is I video each tournament and every player gets their entire catalogue and attacking and defending within 2 weeks, because I think it's an incredible learning tool. I know a lot of clubs now video, but they get the team. I give the individual, the player gets to watch themselves. And I think as a learning tool, it's incredible. I try and offer a little debrief to the parents. I try and coach the parents at the end of the tournament to know what to look at when they have that video, because I'd love to see them out in the garden with their kids, because not just the 1v1 part, it's the relationship that me and my dad were able to have. The journey we went on together, I want that for everyone, and that connection, and so if I can help educate parents to get in the garden with their son, with their daughter, and then go on a 1v1 journey together to improve in their soccer, then that makes me feel good.
And I think that's a brilliant way to kind of wrap up this conversation. But in every episode, there's one last question that comes from Jack. So I'm going to pass over to Jack.
Yeah, put you on the spot. The last question is always the same question, which is, if you could change one thing about the game, what would it be?
Wow. I mean, I'm sure you can guess what it's going to be. One thing, what What I don't like at the moment in youth soccer around America is this whole trials for every youth club. They have tryouts, as you call them, tryouts. And I understand because there's such an influx of players wanting to play and there's only so many spaces. But for the thought of a 8-year-old being told that they're a failure, I find it troubling. And I wish there was a better way of doing that. So that's on the youth side.
Brilliant. I thought some great answers from the youth and the professional side. But no, Steve, this has been excellent. Some great insights into the 1v1. So really appreciate it. But before we do finish, we're going to put Jack back on the spot and under the spotlight. How you feeling, Jack, for this Guess Who? Who's it going to be?
Not great. I might need Steve's help here. I'm struggling a little bit. I think after the second clue I'm on, the name that's in my head is... I just don't know if he played 250 times before the Premier League, but I'll go Fernando Torres.
I was just about to say that. Damn it.
Okay, so you're locking in Fernando Torres after clue 2, so I'm going to give you clue 3. Clue 3, I joined Arsenal from Malaga in 2012.
Wow.
Was that Santi Cazorla? Was he Malaga?
Is that who you're locking in?
I'll go him for now because I can't think of...
Oh, that's a very good guess.
Yeah.
Okay, so we'll move on to clue 4. I scored twice on my Premier League debut.
I don't know. He could have done. Could have easily done. He scored a few goals for him. Did he win 2 Euros? I think he probably was in those squads, right? 250 times before Arsenal. I could see it being close, but yeah, maybe. I'm gonna have to stick with him because I've got no one else that's coming to mind.
Okay.
I mean, Fabregas played for us, but Spanish. There wasn't that many. Not been that many Spanish players played for Arsenal. I suppose there has, but.
Okay, so last clue then I'm going to give.
Yeah.
This player wore the number 19 at Arsenal and is still playing today as a 40-year-old player.
No.
Yeah, I know.
19, right? I think it was number 19. Yeah. So we'll go Cazorla. Santi Cazorla.
So you locked that in clue 3, and I can confirm that is the correct answer. So 3 points are on the leaderboard.
Well
yeah, the Malaga thing helps big time. He still played. Didn't he have a bad injury at one point as well? Did he have a broken leg?
I think he broke his leg.
And now he's still playing at 40, which is some going, yeah.
He scored a winning goal recently, right? They've got them promoted or something.
Yeah, they're actually doing pretty good for where they are, but I mean to be playing at 40 years old as well, like hats off to him. And like people like Ronaldo, some of these modern players can keep their bodies in shape all the way through, even after having bad injuries. I mean, it's crazy. So
yeah, he was a good player. It's talking to 1v1s, receiving the ball in tight areas, dropping the shoulder. Yeah, good player, under the radar. Doesn't get talked about a lot, but great player.
Yeah, Jack, any final words?
Yeah, I think this has been great. It's definitely made me consider, I've got practices this week. Am I doing enough 1v1s? Am I creating enough 1v1 situations for players to practice 1v1 scenarios? So definitely some good food for thought for, I think, a lot of players, coaches and parents out there too.
Yeah, no, I agree wholeheartedly. And Steve, a big thank you from us. We really appreciate your time. And to the listeners at home, we bid you a farewell.
1,